raised my younger sister like she was my own child after our mom left. But when she turned 18, she announced she was moving in with mom and cutting me off completely because mom told her I'd been lying about everything all along. The day mom left, I didn't even get to say goodbye. She just packed a bag, kissed my sister on the forehead, and didn't even look at me. I remember I was by the doorway, holding her coffee cup in my hand like it was this fragile bit of glass, and wondering to myself why I could sense this hard, ringing sensation in my chest, as though somebody had pulled the air from my body. My sister Lily, she didn't cry. She was only 8, and maybe she didn't realize what was happening, or maybe she was just scared half out of her mind, because she clung to my leg like a life raft. It was at that point that I realized, in a way that I had not until then, that she was mine now. Not technically, not legally, but mine. I'd take care of her. I'd do the mom thing, or at least try. And I did. I worked hard. The first evening, I let her sleep on the sofa and slept in her tiny bedroom, pretending not to notice that I was sleeping on the floor. She was shaking, and when I rubbed her back and said everything was going to be okay, I thought it more than she did. It had to be okay, because otherwise, if I couldn't manage then, I don't know, we'd be completely alone. And we already were, in the meaningful ways. I got a job at a supermarket just a block away. The shift was bad, but the pay was regular enough that we could keep the lights on and eat real food, not frozen pizza or ramen. I made sure Lily had everything she needed for school: books, pencils, the occasional little treat when she did something amazing, like spelling a word right she'd been struggling with or standing up to a bully. Those little moments became everything. They made all the exhaustion, all the lonely nights, feel like they had a purpose. I'd watch her sleep sometimes and think, I'm doing the right thing. I'm looking after her. She doesn't need mom. She has me. And it worked for years. I mean, it really did work. We laughed, we fought like any siblings, but mostly we just existed together. She confided in me things she wouldn't confide in anyone else, secrets, small ones, dreams of becoming a vet, of school phobias, of abandonment, of me. She trusted me, completely. I thought I could maintain that trust forever. And maybe I would have, had it stayed straightforward. But things never stay straightforward, do they? I did not notice at first the way her eyes would flash when she said mom, the way her smile would narrow ever so slightly, or the way occasionally she'd pose questions that I did not want to answer. Things such as, do you think mom even remembers me? Or, did she ever really care? And I'd minimize it, tell her something dumb like, she's busy, that's all. Don't worry about her. And that was fine for a while. She believed it. She trusted me again. But I think deep down, she always doubted it. I always thought I was doing enough. I worked nights, weekends, holidays, just to make her feel like she wasn't missing, like she wasn't missing out. Birthday parties, school plays, doctor's appointments. I was there. Every single time. I didn't get much sleep. I didn't have much of a social life. But I had Lily, and she was worth everything. I remember one time we were snuggled up on the couch and there were blankets all over us, blizzard raging outside, and she just stared at me and said, you're like a dad and a mom all in one. And I was near tears right in front of her. But I swallowed hard because I didn't want her to feel sorry for saying it. I just nodded and said, I try. That little instant, it saw me through all the rest. But as she matured, I began to see things shift. Not horribly, not at first, but little things. She'd glance at her phone a whole lot more, text a lot more, sometimes smile at messages that I couldn't see. I figured it was normal, school, friends, but then the questions began. Mom asked sharper, more urgent questions. Do you think mom would like me too? Or, do you think mom recalls when we... And I'd answer warily, trying to protect her, trying to maintain the story in a way that didn't involve outright lies because sometimes I lied. Little lies like saying mom called when she hadn't, or that she was busy and couldn't visit, just to keep the peace. I didn't think those falsehoods harmed anyone. I didn't think they were required. I didn't think they'd ever matter, like they did later on. The first warning came the day she was 16. She found an old letter mom had left behind, placed inside a box of mine, and inquired about it. I bristled, and I mean bristled. All of my lonely defense mechanisms cried out for me to come up with something fast, and I did. I told her mom wrote it years earlier, that it meant nothing, that she didn't even remember writing it. And she nodded, but I saw it in her eyes, the first crack, the faint shine of doubt. I tried to hide it under care, under attention, under love, under being wherever she needed me to be, and she took it, for now. But there were cracks, and I didn't see them growing. I thought that we were invincible, that the bond we had created was unshatterable. But we weren't. It never is it? And then during last summer when she was 17, she started spending more of her time away from home, texting, sneaking off. I tried to keep calm, tried to believe in her, but there was a weight in my chest that I could not shake. Something did not feel right. And then, the bombshell. She came home from school one afternoon, suitcase in hand, eyes red like she'd been crying, and she said it. She said she was moving in with Mom, and not just that. She said she wanted nothing to do with me anymore. That I'd lied about everything. That Mom had told her the truth. That all the years I'd spent raising her, protecting her, loving her, had been a lie. I couldn't even talk. I was there, frozen, while she packed as if I didn't exist. She didn't want to hear my reasons. She didn't want to hear me beg, or cry, or yell. She just left. And the house was empty in a way that I never knew it could be. All that work, all that love, all those sleepless nights, all the care taken to never let her feel behind, gone in one conversation. I spent hours sitting in the living room once she'd left, staring at where she'd sat, my own chest hollow. I didn't comprehend. I didn't get it. How could she choose Mom's word over mine? After everything? After everything I'd done for her? And that's when it occurred to me. I hadn't protected her from Mom. Not really. Because Mom had never stopped being Mom. She'd just been holding back, waiting for the perfect time to come creeping back in, to wipe out all of my work, to cause Lily to forget the years we'd spent together. And I realized that love, even the kind you fight with everything inside of you, isn't always enough. It is not always enough to keep someone from leaving, from thinking what they please, from shutting you out. And I sat there, staring at the floor, thinking about the way she smiled at me when she was 8 years old, the way she trusted me completely, and asking myself whether she ever would again. Maybe she would, maybe she wouldn't, and I couldn't stop it. I could only feel it, every part of it, every broken, aching piece, and I did. I felt it. I permitted myself to feel it, and I think that's when I really started to understand what it was like to be a guardian, a caretaker, somebody who loves somebody more than anything and lets them go even if it kills you completely. The first few weeks after she left were silent, not just quiet, as though the house itself had been quieter, even though it had, but this suffocating, eating silence that seemed to gather in every crevice, every room, every breath I breathed. I'd wake up in the morning, go to the kitchen, and make 2 cups of coffee out of habit, only to find that there was no one to share the second cup with. No quiet rustle of steps on the stairs, no sleepy morning smile, nothing. And whenever I picked up the phone to text her, to ask if she was okay, my thumb lingered over the screen. I did not want to jinx my luck. I did not want to scare her off further. But God, I wanted to scream at her, get her attention, tell her everything, tell her she was wrong, that I had never lied about the things that mattered, that each night I stayed up waiting while she slept, that each meal I cooked, that each tear I wiped from her cheek, all of them were true. But the words did not emerge. They just stuck, wedged somehow in my throat, twisting with sorrow and guilt, and the kind of hopelessness I didn't know how to endure. I started keeping myself busy, working extra hours, cleaning the house, fixing things that didn't even need fixing, anything to keep my mind off the echo of her not being there. And still, even with that distraction, I could feel her everywhere. Her little shoes still tidily lined up by the entrance, her blankets lying just so as she liked them, the little scraps of paper she would place in my lunch bag for no discernible reason whatsoever, just to make me smile. I found one of those pieces of paper hidden in a drawer one afternoon, dusting and curled at the edges. It said, "I love you, big sis," in her wee, messy writing, and I held it close to my chest and cried. I cried for the little girl that she had once been, for the bond we shared, for the years that had been ripped from me in an instant, and I cried for the person that I'd become, the person that couldn't keep her safe. I kept thinking about calling her, repeatedly, but each time I imagined her voice telling me, "I don't want to talk to you," and my courage failed. I had to make her aware of the truth, the whole truth. How Mom never told the truth. How she'd manipulated the story to make me out to be the villain. What if she didn't believe me? What if I lost her forever? And then there were the evenings when I'd see things outside, footsteps, noises that seemed like her, and I'd run to the window, my heart pounding, only to see strangers, kids in the neighborhood, laughing and stumbling back home. I yearned for that moment when I knew she might return, that I fantasized about it. I imagined her crashing in through the door, throwing herself into my arms, saying she'd got it, that she'd made a mistake. But I wasn't going to get too optimistic, because optimism was no longer safe. Optimism was taking the risk of getting hurt once more, and heartbreak was my shadow. One afternoon, about a month after she'd left, I found out she'd changed number. Not by mistake. Not because she'd lost the old one. She'd done it specifically so I couldn't reach her, and that murdered something within me that wasn't even conscious it was still alive. Anger, initially intense, searing, hot, wild, directed at her, at Mom, at the universe for letting this happen. Why would she do this to me? To us? I'd raised her, for God's sake. I'd been her refuge, and she'd quit me for a woman who'd left us in the first place. It was not real, like I was stuck in somebody else's life. And then the anger passed, like anger always does, and was followed by open, unshielded grief that I couldn't shield myself from. I started to think of all the tiny little things I'd taken for granted would always be there. The way she'd sleep on my lap when I read to her, the way she'd cry when she'd skinned her knee, the way she'd laugh at my lame jokes even when they weren't funny. And I thought that I had held on to all of that so tightly in my head, thinking it was enough. But memories aren't enough. They can't contain a person. And that's when the guilt came hardest. The kind of guilt that ties your stomach in knots, and your chest into a hollow knot. The guilt of wondering if perhaps, somehow, I hadn't done enough. That perhaps I'd been too controlling, too overprotective, too human. I replayed every conversation, every choice I'd made, every little lie I'd told, trying to determine which one had tipped the scale. And it's exhausting, the way your mind can turn each step, each word, into evidence of failing. I found myself noticing her in tiny things. Her breakfast cereal on the shelf, the sweatshirt she had left on the chair, her little paintbrush in the bathroom. And she was haunting the house. I'd tell her things, stupidly sometimes, like maybe the universe would hear me. "Come back," I'd whisper into the empty walls. "Please, just come back." And the silence would answer back, cold and unforgiving. When I passed by her mom's new apartment complex for the first time, I was going to die. I'd written down the number on a scrap of paper she'd left behind, packing up, and I traced it, wondering if maybe I could find her, wondering if proximity would make her remember me. And I stood outside viewing her from behind the glass, sitting at a table, laughing with Mom, her hair spilling over her eyes in the way I used to know so well. And I hated it. I hated them. I resented her for that, and I resented myself for resenting her. And yet down inside, there was this terrible, gnawing hunger. I wanted to reach in, to grab hold of her, to drag her back to the life we'd lived, to remind her that I'd always been the one who'd swept her up when she stumbled, who'd loved her when no one else would. But I couldn't. I was unable to touch her, unable to talk to her, unable to even glance at her. And that was the worst of all. I tried to keep busy, tried to drown the feeling in work, in acquaintances that I didn't personally have anything in common with, in movies and music, anything. But she was everywhere. Everywhere I went, everywhere I looked. I'd find myself scheming up possibilities in which she'd come back, in which we'd sit here a decade from now laughing at this, in which she'd see at last that Mom had been lying. And those fantasies, they sustained me, barely. Weeks later, I was sitting on the porch one night, smoking a cigarette I didn't need, staring up at the stars, and it occurred to me, I couldn't get her to believe the truth. I couldn't push her, or reason her out, or wrap my arms around her and penetrate to her. I could only wait. Not even wait, really, just be. Endure the love I had for her in private, quietly, silently, in my heart, hoping that it would locate her someday, or that it wouldn't kill me carrying it until it did. And it did hurt. God, it hurt like hell. But in the pain, there was a strange sort of clarity. I knew that love is not control. Love is not hanging on. Love is not winning. It's about holding on when it's hardest and letting go when you have to, even if your heart shatters doing so. And I remembered the little girl she'd been, and the big girl she was becoming. And I wished, somewhere deep inside, that she recalled me, not the lies, not the rage, not the betrayal, but me, the one who'd stayed, who'd loved her, who'd fought for her every day. That hope, it was small, fragile, but it was there. And in that moment, on the porch with the night closing in around me, I let myself feel it. Let myself remember that even when a person leaves, even when they cut you completely out of their world, the love you gave them doesn't cease. It stays, it lingers. And maybe it's enough to bring them back. Or maybe not, and I had to live with that. Either way, I had to keep going. Months passed, and the silence at home became this living thing, this weight I carried with me wherever I went. I'd come home from work, and it was like walking into a museum of memories, all of hers, all laughing at me because she wasn't there. I didn't even have the strength to put things around her back in place. Her bag was still in the corner, half debagged, like she might come tearing through the door at any moment. And part of me, I wished she would. I wished that she'd come charging in, like I could wiggle my fingers and fix it. But reality kept slapping me in the face each morning when the alarm sounded and the house was empty. When I reached out for the couch, and it was cold and unoccupied, I started dreaming about her. Not the kind of dreams you dream where you just see someone you love, but the kind where she is there, smiling at me, laughing, believing in me once more. And I'd wake up, my heart pounding, clutching the sheets as if I could draw her back from the dream. And then the world would slam back in, and I'd be alone. I made a move on her once, finally, after faking it for weeks, after lying in bed counting down the hours, watching the ceiling at night. I texted her, slowly, uncertainly, each word heavy with its own subconscious intent I couldn't even try to define. "Hey, just called to check in. Hope you're alright. I miss you." I sat there. Hours went by, become one day, and then there was a reply, abrupt, curt. "I don't want to talk." Like that. Without explanation, without hesitation, anything. Just finity. My stomach nodded, and I swear I could feel my heart break, piece by minute piece. I needed to scream, to cry, to beg her to recall, to trust me, to just return. But I didn't, because I knew I couldn't, and to know it, to be powerless, it ate away at me like slow poison. I started to pay attention to other things too, where we'd used to hang out, tunes on the radio, smells in the air, and all the tiny things reminded me that she wasn't around anymore. I'd drive by the park where we'd walk home from school, see other kids playing there, and I'd feel her hands slipping out of mine, small and warm, and my chest would close up. I tried keeping myself occupied, working more, volunteering at the shelter, anything to distract myself, and the distraction only made the absence more intensely felt, because no matter how hard I tried, she wasn't there to see, to laugh, to complain, to be with me. And every time I heard some person mention their brother or sister, or saw a mother and daughter sitting together, or even just heard someone call another person, sis, as they went by, it was like a knife twisting in my chest. I know it sounds stupid, but it wasn't unhappiness. It was this mix of sadness and shame and longing I couldn't untangle. I questioned everything, all my choices, all the lies I had told, all the decisions I had made thinking that I was keeping her safe. Had it even been protection, or had I just been trying to take charge of something that I couldn't? Was I a fool to think that love could stabilize someone? And naturally, the answer to that would be no, it couldn't, nothing ever could. I had thought I'd done everything right, and she was still gone. And the worst part? I could still visualize her in my mind. The little mannerisms, the fact that she'd smooth a lock of hair behind her ear when she was nervous, hum to herself as she sketched, the smile on her face when she finally solved the problem she'd been struggling with for an hour. All those things, all these little pieces of her, they belonged to me, or they had. And now, I didn't know. I didn't know if I'd ever get them back or not. And that not knowing, that fear, was more unpleasant than the pain itself. A few weeks later, I learned through a mutual friend that she had changed schools, gotten a new group of friends, and was thriving in ways that I wasn't even invited to. Part of me wanted to be happy for her. I really did. I hoped she would have all of what I could not give to her, be loved and cared for, and know she mattered. But another part of me, the part that had shared all of her childhood with me, the part that had stayed up late at night hoping she'd be fed enough or do well in school, that part, it hurt, and I hated that. I hated that I experienced this bitter mix of pride and frustration, longing and fury. I hated that I couldn't separate love and heartbreak. And then there was the one that got under my skin. One evening, I came home to find a package sitting on the door. No note, only her name, scribbled in a rush on the tag. My own fingers shook as I tore it open, hoping maybe she'd reached out, that maybe she'd changed her mind. Inside, a picture, one of the ones she used to do in class, carefully folded and wadded up, but at once recognizable as her artwork. And on the other side, a line, written by herself, "I'll always remember," and that, I couldn't handle. I laughed and wept both at once, and I knew that this was the stuff. She hadn't forgotten me, not entirely. Somewhere down inside under all the layers of resentment, pressure, and distance, she remembered, and I could hold on to that. Not the way I wanted to, the way I ached to, but something. It was a lifeline. A thin one, yes, but it was tangible. I started writing to her then, the letters that I never sent, filling up notebooks with everything I wanted her to know, everything I wanted to say, everything I couldn't say out loud. I vomited up my day, my fear, my guilt, my memory. I told her of the mornings I woke up thinking she was still here, of the nights I'd cried into the pillow, of how I'd replayed her smile 1,000 times in my mind to keep her alive in my heart. I never sent the letters. I didn't know if I ever would, but writing, it kept me sane. It reminded me that the bond we had, however shattered into fragments, was not lost at all. It was still alive, suspended somewhere between pen and memory. And I started to realize, slowly, painfully, something I'd never known before, that love isn't ownership. That it's not about possessing someone or being right. It's about keeping them in your heart, even when they go in a direction you don't understand. It's about letting go without letting them go, and I could do that. And I think, in coming to understand that, I started to heal, piece by piece, because she was my everything, and losing her was like losing an arm. But the arm did not vanish altogether. I could still feel it in my chest, and that, I realized, was enough to keep me going on, even if the aunt didn't have her by my side, at least temporarily. Years went by, and life went on, regardless of whether I was prepared for it or not. I kept working, kept going through the motions, kept carrying the weight of her loss as a secret that no one else could possibly understand. I saw her occasionally since then, from a distance, always with Mom, always polite but distant. Not cold, exactly, but cautious, as if she was measuring how much of me she could let herself remember without being guilty or confused. And I get it, I really do, because she had her life now, her choices, her freedom. And the thing is, I had to let her have it, no matter how hurtful it was. I kept her drawings, the ones she'd left behind, tucked in boxes, sometimes pulling them out when the silence got too loud. I'd trace her handwriting, imagine her voice reading the words aloud, and it would be enough for a little while. But even in quiet, even after I had reassured myself that I was okay, I could still sense the hollow spot in the center of my chest where she had lain. It didn't shrink, it didn't dissipate, and maybe it never would. But there was something peaceful in the pain, as well. It reminded me that I loved her, that I did love her, that love, true love, does not go away because one leaves. I learned to live with it, to be with it without letting it consume me. I built a life around the memories, around the love, around the fragments of her that remained within me. I dated, I made friends, I laughed sometimes, but always that empty room inside me that was her own. And I think somewhere inside her, she knew so too, because when I last saw her, she smiled at me in that small, fleeting way, and there was recognition. Maybe she remembered it all, maybe she didn't. Maybe she forgave me for the lie, maybe she didn't even need to. But that smile, that single, gentle smile, was all it took to recall that our bond had never been severed. And it occurred to me then, on a park bench where we would stroll after school, the weight of the world pressing in but alleviated by the warmth of recollection, that love is not something to possess. It has nothing to do with control or proof or even fairness. It's about being there, even when you can't be there in body. It's about holding someone inside you, holding them close, even when they leave. And I could do that. I could hold her forever, needing nothing from her. And for some reason, that truth made the hurting bearable. It didn't take it from me, but it reshaped it, incorporated it into the story instead of being the conclusion of it. I thought of all the times we'd shared, all the nights I'd lain awake worried, all the little victories and defeats, all the laughter and rage and love, and I finally understood, nothing had been wasted. Not one second, not one hug, not one bedtime story, not one scraped knee I'd kissed better. It had mattered, and if she ever looked back, really looked back, maybe she'd see it too, maybe not, but that wasn't for me to decide anymore. And on one night, years after she'd gone, after I'd finally stopped crying every day, after I'd stopped looking constantly at my phone, I walked into the kitchen and noticed I was smiling. Not at anything in particular, not because the world had finally become tolerable, but because I'd survived. I'd loved her with all my being, I'd struggled for her as much as I could, and I remained. And there's a strange kind of peace in that, a quietness of knowledge that comes after pain, that comes after heartache, that comes after loss. It's not joy, not exactly, it's acceptance. And in the acceptance, I knew something more. I could love again. Not in the same way, not with the same intensity, not in the same existence, but I could open my heart without fear of having it shattered into fragments. Because even shattered, I was intact enough to cling to what mattered most. The love that I had for my sister, the love that I had for the life I'd built, the love that I had for myself in spite of everything. And maybe that is the lesson in all of this, that even when people leave, even when the people we love make choices that hurt us, the love we have, the care we show, the memories we treasure, they never disappear. They become part of us. They shape us. They linger in ways we are sometimes not even aware. And I embrace her, still, in silent moments when the world rests, when the house rests, when the wind whispers through the branches. And I smile because she's mine. Always, somehow, she remains with me. And that is enough. That is all I need. Not vengeance, not reconciliation, not justification, not apology. Just remembering what we had. Being aware of the fact that I had tried to do everything in my power. And realizing that some things are out of our hands. And for the first time in a long time, I was free. Free to live, free to love, free to hope, in the little things, that one day, maybe, she'd remember me not as a liar, but as a man who loved her with abandon, completely, unconditionally. And maybe that, at the end of the day, is all that really counts.